What's going on, guys? We are here, and guess what time it is? It's Bullnose time. So it's time to go ahead and start working on the Bullnose. We've been having this baby just sitting here. I'll show you a little bit of it. That's all you need to see. That's all you need to know. It is a Gen 3 Coyote with a VMP supercharger. It's got a 10-speed transmission, and it's got a junky front suspension that we are going to address. Now this truck, I bought it a couple months ago and we just haven't had time to start working on it, but we are waiting on some parts for some vehicles. We're waiting on some more parts for this one that we haven't gotten yet. And also in the other cars, we're just kind of waiting on parts. So we're not sitting around, but we're kind of sitting around. Nah, I'm just kidding. There's always a bunch of work here in the shop anyway, though. We got a bunch of stuff going on. But it's time to work on the Bullnose. So I didn't neglect this thing, but I just kind of not have been working on it because we've been busy with all the other projects. So this time, we're gonna go ahead and pull the motor out and we're going to address the front suspension. Now, if you know anything about these trucks, it has got a front suspension that is just trash. Now, if you lower them, the tires are gonna be like this. I mean, you really cannot do a whole bunch. They do sell some stuff for it, but it's just not a good design. I don't know what Ford was thinking at that point in time, but it is not a good design. When you lower them, when you want them to look good, when you want them to perform, it's not good. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna cut the whole front end apart, like everything. Wheels, everything, brakes. We're gonna pull everything off. And we're gonna install a Crown Vic front end. Yes, a Crown Vic front end. And everybody knows, the Crown Vic's, it's like your grandma's car. You know, she's riding down the road. They ride super, super badass, super smooth. I mean, it is meant for grandma. It's a grandma car. I mean, it's badass, and they fit on these things. So in this transformation that we're going to do, we're gonna show you how we cut everything out and install a Crown Vic front IFS suspension, and then we're gonna go ahead and install back the Coyote. We're gonna put the 10-speed transmission and then proceed to do everything else around it. Now we gotta do some fabrication on it, but let's go ahead and get this thing hooked up though. I got all the bolts undone on the bottom. The motor doesn't even, somebody else did this work and I don't even know. I don't even know.
Does it make you mad?
It kind of makes me mad though, because it's all, I mean, it looks like they just kind of went in there and just like, rah, rah, rah. Just kind of chopped everything up, and I don't even know.
They nibbled on the frame.
Man, it is. You're going to see, whenever we pull the motor out, you're going to see how bad of a job they did. I guess they thought they did a good job, but really. But let's jump into it and let's go ahead and get this motor out. Okay, so we got the motor out and we've got the core support out also because it wasn't sitting right. So the front, which is the tips of the frame, were just a little bit moved over. So what I did is I measured everything, I squared everything off, and then I put them back in place where they need to be. Test fitted the front bumper and everything is lining up good. So what we're going to do today, we're going to jack it up, we're going to put it on jack stand, take the wheels off, undo all the brake lines and all that kind of stuff, and mark where we're gonna cut and start cutting everything that we don't need. That way tomorrow or the day after, whenever the IFS comes in for the Crown Vic, we can get everything cleaned up, all the welds that we need to clean up and spot welds that we need to cut. So now we can start fabricating something to put the IFS into place before we can actually put the motor and transmission back in there. So go ahead and jump right back into it, and guys, follow along. Okay, so things got a little serious right now. So we went ahead and got everything stripped down. We don't know if we're gonna use this or not, but we're gonna keep that right now. So we've got everything, all the front suspension, you can see. Everything that goes with it, springs, shocks, arms, steering, I mean, every single thing. So now we've got a bare front end, so we're gonna go ahead and remove all this. But first I've got a brace here. That way this doesn't open up whenever we do actually cut this, because it's a big long space. And it might move on you, so you might want to always just kind of put you a bar, tack it in there. You don't have to fully weld it, but you just kind of tack it in there. Make sure it's nice and snug, doesn't pull in when you weld it. Then now you can proceed to remove all the rivets. If you got a plasma, if you got a torch or whatever, you can just go ahead and cut all this off right there to the edge. Basically along this side right there, you can cut all that, and then you can cut all what you need there so you can remove it. But when you do that, you're gonna have to get in there and grind it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bust off all these rivets, but at the end, everything will be clean and we can just remove all this stuff and just leave the bare frame by itself. We can go ahead and clean it, we can go ahead and paint it, do whatever, get it ready for when we get the IFS, and then we start mocking it up. We are going to use these two back holes. So on the IFS, these holes will line up perfectly. Obviously the front ones are not, because you know it's going to have a space. We're going to have to add some material to this and on the bottom side, so that we can put the long bolts that go there, and we have to put a spacer in between so that the bolt doesn't bend the frame on the top and the bottom. So basically you have to put two long spacers. But we'll get that once we have the IFS in place, and then we'll show you what we need. But for now, we got to bust out the grinder, and we've got to remove all these rivets so we can take that stuff off. And then, you know, before that, we've got to tack something in here. Also, right here in the back, we have to remove these also. So it's got a couple rivets, one there, one in the bottom, and it's got a nut and a bolt in the back. So we basically remove these. You know, you can cut them, whatever you want to do, but you got to take those off too. That way they're not in the way. And whenever the new one comes in, there is an arm that attaches in the back side. We have to build something for it. It's going to have a sway bar, so we have to do some bracketry for that. So we're going to go ahead and do that, brace something up, start taking this stuff off. Alright guys, so day 2 of grinding. We've got all this stuff taken off. And obviously, you know, of course, we don't need this stuff here. So we're going to remove all this section. It's got a couple rivets, one on top, one on bottom. It's got some welds right there. So we're gonna go ahead and cut all this, as we're not gonna need this part. This is where the steering box was, the factory steering box. We're not gonna need that because now the steering is gonna be on the IFS, which it's already mounted on the bottom. It's got a rack and pinion, and we don't need the gearbox anymore. So we're just gonna go ahead and cut all this section off. We're gonna make some room for it. We're gonna clean all this stuff up, and then we'll get both frame rails nice and clean for whenever we get the IFS. So the IFS, I think we should maybe have it tomorrow. I talked to the guys today, and they are going to basically cut the piece of the frame from the car that they're taking it off. That way I can have all the bolts, all the nuts, and everything in between. That way nothing is missing, and then we can transfer over some parts to this frame. But we've got everything squared off, you can see, because obviously when you cut, it tends to kind of lean outwards and stuff like that. There's nothing in between to hold it, so the frames are kind of moved this way and this way. So we've got it tight down, and we've got the bumper, and we've got the correct measurements from the core support, which is 44 inches from center to center. And we've got fenders and everything centered up, and we've got our bumper centered up as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive into this, start cutting all this kind of stuff, and then basically get all this cleaned up and just get it ready for whenever we get the IFS. Sometimes you just gotta get a bigger hammer. Well, we have every bracket that was available completely out. Now, we just gotta go back and wire brush this thing, run the wire wheel through it, get everything cleaned up. Wire wheel time. Let's go ahead and get the whole frame cleaned up, because they're actually gonna go ahead and drop off the IFS today, maybe like around 6. I want to get everything cleaned up, wire brushed, nice and clean. We'll probably get it painted, get all the inside clean and everything, all the old oil and dirt and all that crap, all the outside, and then we'll just kind of wait for the IFS to show up, and then we can probably mock it up in there and see how it looks. All right, guys, so we've got the frame cleaned up. As you can see, all wire wheeled, nice. Cleaned up, and I did just a little bit of a spray on the outside. That way, you know, because we still got to do some welding on the inside. But as you can see, everything is cleaned up. And now these holes right here, these are some factory holes that it had for some rivets. And these are the ones that are gonna align with the IFS, the back bolt holes. So of course, obviously you gotta make them bigger. But we did get the IFS today, this morning. So we got it here. And actually, it is a lot better than I expected, because they actually cut this thing off from the frame rails, which now it's gonna allow me to actually probably cut part of the frame and then box it in on the original frame. And then I don't have to make any other modifications for the mounting holes and all that kind of stuff. It already has it in it. So just a couple of measurements and then where we're gonna cut and stuff like that. But for now, we're gonna remove all the unnecessary stuff. Obviously, we're not gonna be using ABS. We're gonna take all that stuff off. Who needs brakes anyway? But we'll take all that, all the hardware, whatever we don't need, we'll remove it. And then we will take the pieces off the frame, and then we'll measure them up. Then we'll start mocking them over there and marking them and see where we are gonna have to cut. So obviously you can't put the whole frame, just sandwich it in there. So we're probably gonna have to notch some of it on the side, that way we can get it in place and get the correct measurements, and then weld everything up together. And it'll actually make the installation more of a breeze, because we will have the factory locations. We'll probably have the front where the sway bar goes. We're not going to use the back because that's not going to allow us to use it, but we are going to have to make modifications on the frame so we can mount the bottom brackets. But for the most part, we got the IFS here, the Crown Vic IFS, and let's go ahead and get it stripped down and see what we can use and what we need to junk to the trash. Big shout out to our guys over at Huntsville Auto Truck and Salvage. They took care of us. You know, they actually delivered this thing to us. If you need anything from them, Huntsville Auto and Truck Parts. So we're gonna put the link on there. If you guys need anything, these guys got a whole bunch of cars and just about probably anything that you are looking for, they got it. We were looking for a Crown Vic front end, and guess what? They chopped the car up. They brought us the front end, delivered it to our shop. Big shout out to them guys, Huntsville Auto Truck and Parts. starts to rain again. All right, so let's go ahead and mock up the IFS in there. So I talked about using the factory frame rails because, well, we thought that they were actually solid, and come to find out that they only have these in there, and it's got a spot weld on the top, a spot weld on this side, nothing on the bottom. So I figured we took those out, we drilled our hose here, and after we're done, then we'll box this in, and basically it'll do the same exact thing as what that one has. So obviously it was a lot more work, but in the end result, it actually it fits nicer, it looks better, and it'll be just as strong once we box it all up, and it'll be okay. So we're gonna go ahead and try to fit this in here, bolt it in the back, and then it'll tell us where exactly we need or what we need to add as far as material for our front bolt. So let's go ahead and try to get this thing in here. There we go. Okay, so these back brackets here, I had to loosen up the nut because of course they were in an angle to just kind of give me a better representation of where it's going to go. But I'm trying to get the bolts here, but obviously they make the control arm be to where it is barely you can put it on. A little bit of finessing. Get out of bed. Oh, maybe we need more finessing. Like the damn bolt is real freaking long. I'm gonna have to cut that bolt. I'm gonna need a grinder with a cutting disc and the extension. Alright guys, so this bolt right here is what I'm talking about. You can see I went ahead and cut it. Doesn't affect anything because it's a big lock nut. So obviously this kind of gets in the way because the bolt goes right through here. And as you can see, obviously it kind of gets in the way. So we're gonna cut this little thing off, make it easier for this guy to go up in there. And then we'll line up everything to where it needs to go. Yep. Looks like we may have an IFS just about in place. Yep.
Durability test.
Durability test. So now this goes there. Yes. Actually, right there, it is where it actually goes. And that is how you bolt up a IFS front suspension for a Bullnose from a Crown Vic, Grand Marquis, or Police Interceptor. Now all we have to do is, since we got all the right measurements, we've got to weld this here, weld this on top, both sides, give it a nice weld, and then we can proceed to mark our holes in the bottom. See, this one's going to be pretty good right there. And then we'll run the other piece on top, and then we'll add some material from here. And we'll do the same thing for this side. We'll make a hole. And then we'll notch this and we'll add some material from here. So about right there. Same thing on the bottom. And then we'll be able to box it in. Let's go. Stay tuned for our second part, as we're gonna go ahead and finish up all this stuff. Probably box everything in and then completely have the IFS 100% bolted up, frame painted, boxed in. So stay tuned for that.